We began with MS Now's Josh Einiger covering developments from Dubai. MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode. Also with us, Josh Lederman, Princeton University fellow at the Center for International Security Studies. Suzanne Maloney, vice president and director of foreign policy at the Brookings Institution. And Michael Feinberg, a former senior FBI counterintelligence agent. So, David, let me start with you. Tell us about the significance of this resignation and the impact on U.S. national security.
I think there's definitely a political impact for President Trump in that Joe Kent was seen as a sort of big supporter of the president, a big supporter of the MAGA base. And the language he's using here about there being no imminent threat from Iran towards the United States undermines the core argument that the president made to the country. It adds to this sense that the planning and execution of this military operation just has not gone well. And Joe Kent is close friends with Tucker Carlson. He has issued a statement. He did a brief interview, Carlson did, with the New York Times, where he praised Kent for resigning. And he predicted that the neocons, the neoconservatives, would destroy Kent now. And this shows this very, large rift in the Republican Party between the MAGA movement, which doesn't want the U.S. involved in foreign wars, and what they view as the neocons, sort of George W. Bush, the interventions that happened previously in Iraq. In terms of national security, it's just more turmoil and more distraction at a time the U.S. doesn't need it. There are concerns about retaliatory attacks by people who sympathize with Iran, and not having a director of the National Counterterrorism Center does not help.
Right. And Kent is a veteran himself. His wife died serving this country. Michael, can you explain how crucial this role is? The director of the National Counterterrorism Center. What does that position encompass?
So one of the things that the nation learned in a very difficult way was after 9/11, one of the big problems within the intelligence community that allowed the attackers to sort of slip between the cracks of our defenses was a real lack of coordination among the constituent agencies. It's why ODNI was created, and it's why the National Counterterrorism Center was created. I'm not incredibly concerned that an attack is going to fall through the cracks like it did on 9/11 or in some of the attacks we saw beforehand, but this is a blow to the intelligence community. While communications between the various agencies has improved exponentially over the past 2.5 decades, not having someone at the helm of the organization that is supposed to manage traffic between them is clearly going to be a liability for the community and the nation as a whole.
Josh Lederman, Kent was all in MAGA. I mean, he even says in his resignation letter he's always supported Trump's values and foreign policy until this summer. Of course, that's when we saw those first strikes against Iran. I'm not sure exactly if that's what he's referring to. And he goes on to say that the time for bold action is now. And he's writing this to the president. You can reverse course and chart a new path for our nation, or you can allow us to slip further toward decline and chaos. You hold the cards. What could this indicate about potential support for this war more broadly?
It could be a political problem, Anna, because he invokes two issues that are really resonant for the MAGA base. The concern that this could turn into another Iraq war-style quagmire, and the notion that Israel has pulled the U.S. into this war. We've heard the MAGA base talk a lot about both of those. But this is also potentially a legal problem, Anna, because under international law, you can't just start a preventive war saying, this people are bad, sometime down the line they could bomb us, so we're going to bomb them first. You can take preemptive strikes, but it has to be in self-defense against an imminent threat. And the top counterterrorism official whose job it is to figure out what the threats are, saying there's no imminent threat, that's going to be a legal issue as well.
Right. I mean, he is saying, I cannot in good conscience support this war that Iran very specifically posed no imminent threat to our nation. Suzanne, for a top intelligence official to say the intel wasn't there and to suggest the administration essentially misled the public, what will this mean for allies who are already skeptical of this war?
Well, look, this is a striking revelation from Joe Kent in his resignation letter. I think it gets to the heart of the case for the war, which, of course, the president declined to make in a really robust way to the American people or to the Congress before launching the war. This question of imminence seems to be very vague when we hear Speaker Johnson and officials from the Trump administration try to define exactly how imminent this threat was. To have someone coming from a position, as Kent was, insist that there was nothing imminent, I think it confirms the presumptions of many of us who've been trying to understand the rationalization for this war, and it will create even more hesitance and, frankly, opposition from partners and allies around the world to try to help the administration pick up the pieces in the global economy as Iran is threatening the Strait of Hormuz.
David, what kind of questions would you expect Kent's boss, Tulsi Gabbard, to face tomorrow on this while she is testifying on the Hill during the worldwide threats hearing?
Enormous questions. And there's already questions about Gabbard's tenure, her role going down and seizing ballot boxes in Georgia. So this is a top deputy of her resigning. And you know, she's not seen as a central player in terms of intelligence. And I think this question of imminence that you were just discussing with Suzanne is a key question. There was just a story in the Guardian this morning. Britain's national security advisor was actually at the talks in Geneva, the last talks between the U.S. and Iran before the war started, and he actually felt progress was being made in the talks. You know, that shows that that there wasn't an imminent threat. There was actually that was a Thursday. Talks were supposed to continue the following Monday, but the U.S. chose to start bombing that Saturday night. So all of these stories don't help the administration make its case to the American people.
Well, and it seems like there's another piece of this coming full circle here, Michael. 2 weeks ago, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the U.S. attacked Iran because it knew Israel was going to attack, and that if it did so, Iran would automatically show retaliation against the U.S. Well, now Kent is accusing the administration of going to war because of Israeli pressure. Are you concerned how the president might be interpreting U.S. intelligence?
I've been concerned about how the president might be interpreting U.S. intelligence since Inauguration Day. But Joe Kent's allegations in that letter are very hard to evaluate. There has been a lot of reporting that Israel and Netanyahu may have been the prime movers for this war and lobbied Trump extensively to take a part in it. But Joe Kent also has a history of very close flirtation and association with figures in the white nationalist movement like Nick Fuentes, the Proud Boys, Tucker Carlson, who are very much making these sort of allegations all the time, regardless of whether they have merit. So until we're better briefed on exactly what the communication was between Israel and the Trump administration leading up to this action in Iran, it's very difficult to know how much weight to give what Joe Kent says.
Let's turn to the latest out of the region and our Josh Einiger, who's there in Dubai. Israel is claiming it killed two of the most powerful men remaining in the Iranian regime, specifically military leaders. Josh, are there fears this will spur further retaliation now from Iran? What's the impact?
Well, it definitely, Anna, would seem to raise the stakes if they could be raised anymore. They just were. And by the killings of these two leaders, in particular, Ali Larijani was a top security official who basically took over after the supreme leader was killed at the very beginning of this war. And when it comes to retaliation from Iran, they've been taking really sort of an eye for an eye approach. You fire at an oil facility, I'll fire at an oil facility, airports and the like. And the target of their ire, of their retaliatory ire, really has been the United Arab Emirates here in Dubai, which has had far more than any of the other Gulf countries in terms of firepower heading in this direction from Iran. And after what appeared to be a brief lull in the number of projectiles they were getting, the numbers are creeping up again. In the last 24 hours, the UAE reported 10 ballistic missiles and 45 armed UAVs heading into its airspace, including one spectacularly destructive airstrike on the airport here, the Dubai International Airport's fuel facility, the facility where they hold jet fuel and then transported out to the gates to feed outbound flights. That caused a major disruption that seems to have been resolved at this point. But the retaliation does continue, specifically here in the UAE. And this most recent news from Israel certainly does seem to raise some eyebrows about what else might be headed this way. Anna.
Josh Einiger, thanks for bringing us the latest. Josh Lederman, an Iranian official, warned on Sky News that what's happening with this war could become a Vietnam-style quagmire. I know you used that word earlier when it came to Iraq as well. So the U.S. has been down this road before. Now, this was, of course, coming from Iran's deputy foreign minister, so take that for what it is. But is that a concern you're hearing from others?
Well, the difference so far, Anna, is that there's no U.S. troops on the ground. And when you think about climbing up the escalation ladder, that would be a significant one. I think the concern is that there's really no face-saving way for the president to end this war and claim victory without securing the stockpiles of highly enriched uranium that are on the ground. We've heard from all kinds of national security analysts and officials recently saying there's probably not a way to get that secured and address that issue without putting some type of U.S. presence on the ground. And once the U.S. does take that action, if it does, Iran gets a vote, too, on how this war ends. That could be a significant issue that could start to creep into the kinds of concerns people are expressing about something like the Vietnam War.